Christina, I will open it for initial remarks from you, and then I'll make a couple remarks. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Madam Chairman, before we take a vote on the approval of the application from CPT Buoys LLC for the installation of 2 no-wake surf zone buoys at Merriman Run, I would like to make a motion that the board, along with our council and executive director, move into executive session to discuss this important issue.
Based on what grounds for closed session under FOIA?
To protect the interests of our community.
I don't think that's gonna go.
The state has some very specific guidelines as to when you could.
If it were in regard to things
No
like
problem.
personnel, acquisition of property, things that would affect negotiating posture, anything else, Carl?
Litigation.
Now this one, now this has to be an open session.
Okay.
And if there's litigation, if it's named litigation, we're not aware of it. If it's something pending, we don't have anything to discuss from the board.
Independent until we take action, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So do you want to withdraw your motion?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, Christina, did you have any opening remarks you wanted to make? You don't need to, I just see your name down here, and I wanted to make sure you didn't have anything.
It won't be there next one.
No, I don't have anything that needs to be discussed that hasn't already been
I have
discussed.
tried, I tried.
I will just say the community has been very engaged, and we have done our very best to get back to anyone who has communicated with us. And we appreciate all of the input and have learned a great deal in the past couple of months.
Okay, very good, good job. Okay, so, we're here, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know. Last year, the board of Tlac adopted the no wake surf zone policy. It was adopted unanimously, and the inception of this policy began on January 2nd, the first being holiday, of course. So to date, we have one application. It's the application that's subject of today's action. Where I will begin is to just take a couple steps back and read you just a couple of things to refresh about the navigation committee and how the application has arrived here to the board of directors. So it was the finding of the navigation committee that the applicant met the threshold of contacting 100% of the affected owners and receiving affirmative consent from more than 75% of the owners. Further, the navigation committee at its meeting considered the criteria set forth in the instruction and application for no wake zone, no wake surf zone, based upon the fact that this application meets the criteria established by the counties for no wake surfing zone marker installations. The navigation committee recommends approval of this request from CPT Buoys LLC to install 2 no wake surfing zone markers in Merriman Run. And as a result of that, after committee discussion, there was a motion made by Mr. Cheney that the application be recommended to Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, as the Tlac Board of Directors have approved the application. No, this is not correct. Y'all excuse me just a minute. The Board of Directors we have not taken up the application.
It's already
right.
I'm
Make
sorry.
a motion to.
That's the wrong, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is.
We'll make a motion to,
Next meeting.
recommend that they come to you.
Yes, that's what I was looking for. This is the one. I apologize. A motion by Mr. Cheney, seconded by Mr. Sturman, to abide by the current criteria for regulatory markers as established by the Tri-County Lakes Administrative Commission. Based on this motion, the Navigation Committee is recommending, the motion carried unanimously.
I think you've covered it.
Okay.
I think that's getting to the numbers. That's coming.
Okay, all right. So bottom line, that is an overview of what the navigation committee did. They have sent the application on appropriately to the Tlac Board of Directors for consideration, discussion, and deliberation today for an approval, disapproval, or tabling of the action before us. So what I would like to do at this juncture is to open up board discussion. It's time for us as the TLAC board, to have our initial discussion on this application. We'll of course have discussion, try to answer any questions, concerns, etc. So, the floor is now open to hear from you.
Well, let me start.
Please.
So, in the spirit of transparency, you heard that I chaired the vessel pump out committee. I took on that responsibility specifically because I would have an opportunity to represent the association on this board. I'm a wake surfer. I apologize for the behavior of those people who have disrespected your property and anybody else's property. I apologize for anybody whose dock has been hurt, damaged from wake surfing, from fishing, from tubing, from wakeboarding, from every and anything that has caused this lake to explode. Over the last several days, weeks, I've talked to a lot of people about this situation. I've heard more than once that I'm the problem. I was born and raised in New York, raised my family in Virginia, fell in love with the lake 17 years ago. And I brought my wake surf boat with me. I have a couple concerns about what we're about to vote on. First, I think there's going to be an undesirable outcome. We risk that those proposed placements of the two buoys will create more problems than currently exist. On the northeast side of that no wake surfing zone is approximately 75 to 85 houses. They're about to get rocked. We're going to close off the zone, and the people behind that zone in the upper northeast quadrant are not going to be able to escape. Those wake surf boats are going to go around and around and around. And I'm not sure if we have communicated with those 75 to 85 homeowners about what's to come. I highly encourage that our training program clearly articulates what's going to happen. On the other side of the zone, there's probably about 10 or 15 houses on the southern entrance to the zone. Those homes are going to be challenged when people start coming in from the main channel and turn around. We are simply moving this problem to another area and other areas on the lake. It's going to displace wake surfers into the busy main channels. Right now, we're dealing with physical damage. I'm concerned about worse than that. And quite frankly, as a surfer, I don't believe it's going to remedy your situation. I think it might even make it worse. So, my boat, 6,000 pounds, another 3,000 pounds of ballast, I cannot surf on the back of my boat through that zone. I can skate. That means I can use the same board, I can use the same boat, I can use the same ballast, but I'm just holding on to a line. We are now going to telegraph to the world what's permissible in that zone and what's not permissible in that zone. I know somebody's grandchild who's 12 years old. I know somebody who's 60 years old who will be able to surf right up into that area. My wife or grandmother will throw the line, I will catch it, and that's permissible. It's not going to solve your problem. That same boat, that same ballast, I can be on my wakeboard. Instead of going 10 miles an hour, I can go 24 miles an hour. That's permissible. It's not going to save the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. I think it's just going to make it worse. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know whether the solution is we actually need no wake surfing zones in specific areas. Heck, I've heard someone say this should just be a surf lake. This lake is wonderful for surfing. We should open it up to wake surfing and make this the world dominance of wake surfing. We will be able to generate so much revenue for Richmond, they won't know what to do with it. But obviously that's not the solution. But I am concerned that if we put a zone there, we are just going to exasperate the problem. It's not going to get better. I'm concerned it's going to get worse. I'm also concerned that this board has a credibility issue. If this goes to Richmond, and it goes to the Coast Guard, and it gets rejected, that's going to be a concern. It really is going to be a safety and enforcement issue that we have on the books today. I've got 2 pages of laws that we must follow on this lake, and they're not being followed, and they can't be enforced. We're gonna put this into motion, and it's not gonna be enforced. It's gonna be worse. We're gonna tell everybody exactly what they could do in front of your house. I don't think it's gonna solve the problem. And I think there may be potential litigation. Are we confident that we won't be spending taxpayer resources in court to defend potential litigation that challenges the application process? Has our attorney put any type of opinion together about this for us?
Are you asking that question
I am.
or to the attorney?
The attorney has followed the process for probably 12 months before this board took action, and I feel confident that we followed the procedures we were supposed to follow.
Okay. I don't wanna pick winners and losers. We don't wanna set a precedent on this lake that we're not gonna be able to turn back. We also have some unintended consequences. We have such dissension among our community. I'm not sure this is gonna make it any better. We got a potential negative economic impact. If we get more applications, Christina, how much more can your office manage? And then what's the message? What's next? I mean, if anybody's reading the social pages, people are like, I don't like cigarette boats. I'm gonna go talk to Tlac. I don't like the fishing lures on my dock. I'm gonna go talk to Tlac. I don't like people tubing. I'm gonna go talk to Tlac. This is a slippery slope. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't believe this one no-wake surfing zone is gonna solve anybody's problems, especially the applicants.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir.
If, someone could waken me up a little bit of my memory, didn't we say?
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry?
I can't hear you.
Oh, didn't we say that we were going to relook and reevaluate this whole process after a year or so of it being in place?
That's correct, Mr. Commissioner. Actually, I was the one adamant about that last year when we adopted this, is that at the end of this year, we didn't establish a certain date, but that we would use this first year as an evaluative year, to come back and evaluate what's working, what's not working, the merits of what we're trying to do, et cetera. So you are correct.
I was just going to suggest that if my memory served me right, that, maybe because of the slowness of the process getting in place, that we put that off until next fall and give it time, because this is, if we approved it and if the Coast Guard and everybody else gives it approval, it's going to be December at the earliest, or January, and there are not too many people out on the lake in January, February, and March. In the spring, we'll see a few, but I'd like to see this go in place and actually be able to sit down here and talk about real actions instead of emotion, and there's a lot of emotion on the table these days. So I'd really like to deal with some facts, and for that reason, I think, I'd like to propose, maybe right now is not, I'll leave it open until later, formal proposal, but I'd like to see some time given to this being implemented, and then review what happens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Anybody else?
I'll speak to it.
Yes, of course, Randy.
You're welcome to say no, that's probably fine.
I dare not.
Just reviewing a little bit of the public meeting we had, we did have about 30 people that spoke during the meeting. Of that, there were 9 that were at the meeting that spoke in favor of the no wake surfing zone. There was another 8 that wrote in and asked that their comments be read, and they were in favor. We had about 16 that were opposing the no wake surfing zone. And we had 5, now this comes from my interpretation of my notes, and so we had about 5 that I'm gonna say were somewhat opposed, but their message was really, hey guys, can't we get along? So, on the con side, those that opposed, John's, I think in his comments, he's touched on all of these. There were comments relative to what impact there might be on commerce and home rentals. There was the issue of driving wake surfing into other areas and the main channels specifically. There was raised a safety issue of dropping before this no wake zone or no wake surfing zone, and then picking up again after that zone. There was the comment that from a wake surfer standpoint, we're not the problem, it's other code sports. And relative to that group that may be circulating in that cove, there was many comments that say, if we're causing a problem, just let us know and we'll change our behavior. Several commented that it's an issue for education and not legislation. My estimation, we probably need both. But I will comment that I guess it's next week, 15th of August, the Navigation Committee meets again. One of the things on the agenda is to try to surface what can be done in terms of education. We are hopeful that someone or some group of people out of the, and I'm going to call it the wake surfing community, will step forward and say, we'll take charge of that. I'm not a wake surfer. I'm guessing that that my trying to lead an education issue on wake surfing would not be well received. I'm just guessing. So we would love to have people that are engaged in wake surfing actually take charge of that education process and how it can be effective on this lake.
I'm happy to participate in that. I don't think I could lead it, given everything else that's on my plate, but I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Randy, thank you very much.
So,
Who else wanted to speak?
I would just make- thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm the new member on the board. I mean, this is kind of all this is a learning experience for me. And some of the stuff I've been hearing, I honestly couldn't make a honest vote today because I don't have all the facts on everything. I mean, I've heard things about my docks getting towed up and the shoreline, all that. I mean, everything, the act of God, big boats, little boats, jet skis, and everything affects that type of stuff. I even heard that it had an engineer, a professional opinion on it. I don't know, I even heard that whoever the engineer was, that didn't even stamp it. So if they didn't stamp it, I might as well look at it because I'm not an engineer. I mean, I feel like if you feel comfortable with something, you're gonna stamp that and approve it. That's what's wrong. I mean, I can see it being a train wreck down the road on the other issues on the lake. I mean, I know finance, patrolling the lake is very important. And respect. I mean, you got to have people to respect other people's property and look out for them. And I just don't think this is gonna fix the problem. I mean, I'd hate to think the boats and the revenue that Pennsylvania County generates, we didn't receive it anymore. Because last year on our books, it was like $3.4 million in the watercraft. We billed out, our tax levy was at $307,000. So I mean, I don't know about the other counties, but Pennsylvania County needs $300,000 or $400,000. And we'd like to give some of it back to the lake to help them things. That's the impact of the finance side. And getting people out in the main channel, possible people getting hurt, killed or whatever. I mean, I don't want to think about none of that. I mean, I think education, maybe getting more people understand and respect people, more patrolling. And I'd like to know more about it too. I mean, I just don't think this is the time to really vote yes or no.
Daryl,
All right, thank you.
thank you very much for your comments. Anybody else? Want to make sure all board members are heard.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
this is the 4th year that I have served on Tlac from Bedford County. And we've been talking about this the entire 4 years that I've been here. I've talked to a lot of people, I've read a lot of emails, God knows I've read a lot of emails. And there are pros and cons on both sides of this, and I've heard them. I do know potential economic impact on one side of this. I also know that I have constituents that spend a lot of money to live at this lake, and they're here full time. They're not weekenders, they are full-time residents. So we can't ignore that either, because if your full-timers decide, I'm done with this, I'm going back to wherever, I'm going to another place, that is an economic impact you don't want to get messing with. I've got a couple thoughts on, I do plan to make a motion to approve this today, but I also would recommend that we do a pause on further applications until we have this review of the process and we inspect positive or negative results from if this goes through and is placed in Marion Run. I do agree that I'm not convinced that it's gonna solve the problem, but we gotta start somewhere. But I don't want more applications in the hopper when we don't know if it's actually gonna work or not. So I would like to, I'm gonna make that as part of my recommendation there. I also wanna see a very focused education effort. We've tried things in the past, but we'll put some money to, I will support putting some money to this, that we get in front of the right people, and I think the right people are the folks that show up on Friday afternoon and rent a boat and head out there, or they come in and they rent one of our short-term rentals on the Bedford side and they load up over there off of Marion Run. So I think those are some real targets there, but we need to give it some time to review whether it's been successful or it's been a failure or it's been no result one way or the other before we, I think the applicants will say this wasn't easy and wasn't an easy process. And I'm not sure that it should be an easy process. But I do think they need a voice. We need to make forward movement to make improvements. This isn't the only issue we've got. Got people doing figure eights under Halesford Bridge, pulling the kids on tubes. I don't know how you fix stupid. I really don't.
You don't.
But there are very huge safety things that we could do. I've heard suggestions about tow sports coming down through the S-curves and all those things. I think that's all part of the solution here, but what it is, I don't know exactly. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. I think we've got to start somewhere. I think the approval of this recommendation will keep the ball out in front of everybody to make sure that we are actually doing education that counts and gets to the right place and that we see positive results from this. Because if the education piece works, as many have said that it will, that will reduce the request for more of these zones to pop up. That's what I have on.
Thank you, Mr. Tuck.
Thank you for your leadership on this over the last 4 years. Appreciate it.
Anybody else?
May I comment on Edgar's thought about not accepting additional applications? I know of at least 2 communities that have looked at putting in no wake surfing zones, and as our current applicant would attest, it's not an easy process. And when that homeowner group looked at the process, and they had people in their community that I don't wanna say they were the problem, but they were wake surfers causing an issue in that community. When they were part of also looking at the process of putting in that zone, they all agreed to change their behavior and not seek the zone. And it was the ability of having the possibility of a no wake surfing zone that caused that discussion and solution to exist. And so I'm just, I don't know.
Thank you for that perspective, Randy. Thank you very much. Any other, Mr. Commissioner?
Yeah, I agree with everything Edgar says, except I am, I intend to vote for it too, because I think we need to see it happen, but I don't think we need to see it happen with just one location. I think we need to see several different locations going at the same time, so that we get a little broader perspective. Maybe it's half a dozen or something like that. But if we cut it off, quite frankly, in the next couple of months or so, we probably still have one location. I'm not sure that we're going to get through and pass any more by the end of the year, because there aren't any actually on their way in. So I think to give it, that's why I pushed out next year is the time that we ought to review it, because hopefully there's some in there. Now, if by next year we've only still got this one, I think that says something right off the bat. And maybe what Randy referred to as the way that people are solving the problem is working better. But I think we do need to keep it open long enough to have several locations give their input if they want, and if they don't, then that says something else to me.
So, Mr. Tuck, do you have any comments regarding the time frame that Mr. Commissioner is speaking of, to extend the period of observation and evaluation, or is your motion going to perhaps speak to doing it sooner than later?
Well, I don't think that we can effectively evaluate all of this unless you've got a couple months under your belt. It's either working or it's not. I mean, the season's not that long, and we're almost at the end of it. At the very best, you won't get to test your results until next season. I don't necessarily think we need the full 4 or 5 months of the season to figure that out. I think the first 2 months of that season would be pretty heavy.
So,
You ought to know.
were part of your comments about putting a pause on any,
Yes, to put a pause on it. I hear what he's saying about multiple zones, but if the first zone doesn't work, I don't particularly wanna put other people through it.
okay, okay.
But I'm up to whatever the board decides about that.
Yes, sir.
Can I make a recommendation? Just to make this cleaner when this goes to Richmond, I would recommend that you make a motion to approve, make 2 motions. Make
Yeah.
1 motion to approve it, and you may, I don't know if you have to do this, you may wanna add to that motion that's in the agenda, and further, authorize staff to then forward the application on to Department of Wildlife Resources to the motion. But get that motion made, get it on the table, see how the vote goes on that, and then make a second motion, and then a discussion on what you're gonna do on those.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Do any other directors wish to speak that have not spoken? Anybody? I have just a couple comments, if I may. Mr. Tuck, I like what I'm hearing from you. This has been a real struggle for me over the last year. And it's kept me up at night, frankly, over the last week. These decisions are tough, and in my role as a supervisor, I can tell you, I had to learn a long time ago, we're not gonna make everybody happy all the time, and we don't. And so the bar's pretty high for me to come to a resolution for myself and for my individual vote that's based on listening to my constituency, looking at data, looking at research, and working with my board. and that's where I am. And what I like, Edgar, about what you said, I have learned some things over the last week, as a matter of fact, that I don't think that I really gave a lot of attention to. That makes me think that approving the application will be the thing to do, and to put that pause on additional applications, see how this one goes, evaluate it, but in the interim, what I really strongly would like to infer to your thinking and your motion perhaps with the educational piece, I hear Mr. Stowe talking about the navigation committee taking this up next week. I would like to say, I think we need a broad approach to the educational effort. We tried a year ago to get the wake surf community involved in a loose way around education, and it just didn't materialize. And so now we are here, and as a result of being here, I think everybody in this room would agree that a broad, comprehensive, targeted, pound the pavement type educational effort has not been done, and nor has it been tested over time to see if it curbs behavior, not just with wake surfing, but as I think Mr. Vidovich pointed out, some of the other towed water sports and so forth that cause wakes as well. So I would like the educational effort to become something that TLAC, in conjunction with the navigation committee, perhaps, that if we could work together and put together a cross-section stakeholder group of a couple TLAC board members, NAV committee, some residents of the wake surf community, residents of those that are adversely impacted, and then some objective voices at the table. And I don't want this just to be an educational effort where we just come and we gripe, or we just try to defend our position. There's gonna be a new day for me if we move forward with an educational effort that says, we're gonna bring our objective voice and thinking to the table. And we're gonna look at this issue from top to bottom. We're gonna consider things from all aspects. We're going to get the data that we would need to aid in the decision. And we're gonna make sure we're talking to our community. And I think that if and until we exhaust that in a very meaningful and deliberate way, will we really know if, if we're going to be successful at curbing behaviors, if you will. And I think if we don't educate and do something that's formalized, known, and consistently done, we're not gonna know. More wake surf zones are gonna keep popping up. So trying to see if we can curtail behavior, we can't legislate behavior. Okay, I think we all know that. What we can do is we can educate and try to curtail the behavior. The no wake surf zones, I think that, the jury is out, at least for me, I agree with Edgar, as to whether the application we have in front of us is gonna work or not. There are arguments on both sides of the issue. What we need to do is to adopt it, put it into place, see what works, see what doesn't work. All the while, simultaneously, having this educational effort, getting going soon. I would love for a work group to put something into place that we pull the trigger on at the beginning of the season next year. And I'm talking having it ready to go by March or April in earnest, so that we can, and then put some outcomes and measurement analytics to it. So Edgar, I share those thoughts really with you in terms of if you're gonna make a motion like you had inferred that you would. Those are my feelings based upon a culmination of many things that I've been trying to work on. And I've been working on this with Edgar for 3 to 4 years. There's no question about it. And the legislation that Kathy carried in Richmond, it didn't pass for reasons that are not good reasons. And so I don't believe that that process was exhausted the way it should have been, in my humble opinion. So, will we get to a place where we can revive that effort? Maybe this education committee can come to some, outcome relative to that in the future, I don't know. But I think that we are striving, I'm striving to find balance, and I think you guys that have been listening to me for a year on this, you have heard me say repetitively that I want balance. I want to make sure that we are doing right by those that wanna recreate on this lake in all aspects of recreating on this lake, and that it's safe, that it is protective of the property owners that have a huge investment in their property on this lake, and that we're looking after the lake environmentally. So where's the magic bullet? And this is what this is all about, folks, is trying to find resolutions and mitigations. And I think we can do that, but for the first time, we're coming together as a community. As late as a meeting I had last week, for the first time, we came together, had a discussion where there was no emotion, and it was all about, let's find the right place. And that's what I would propose to everybody in this room, is that we try to find the right resolution and the right mitigations, if there are mitigations to be had. So Edgar, with that,
Before, can I just ask, is there an opportunity to get more law enforcement on the lake? I mean, is there an opportunity for us to go to Richmond and ask for more?
I think that's gonna be something.
Counties?
I think, John, that would be something that the TLAC board, we need to take up as an agenda issue, where we can, take it back to our respective boards of supervisors, for discussion, and possible recommendation. I think the 4 counties could leverage better than just, than just one group, thinking about the education group. Certainly their buy-in would be most helpful, but I think if we could get the 4 legislative boards, to say that this is important and this is why, I think TLAC is the appropriate place for that, because we are the governmental representative body of all things Lake, Leesville, and Smith Mountain. So I do think that's a legitimate, objective, and I think it's a legitimate concern. And we all know everything comes down to money, but it's also gonna come down to priorities. We know that budgets and governmental decisions that require funding are about choices. And so the people that are in your elected bodies have to make choices, and we need to tell them this is an issue, and we need to advocate that. So I humbly, would be happy to take that forward for TLAC, to take that to a different level. Does that?
Absolutely. Again, there are laws that protect homeowners from the type of damage and the type of behavior that they're experiencing today.
Okay.
The law says if I'm in my boat and I create damage for them, there's a law. It's a misdemeanor. There's nobody on the lake enforcing it. We're now gonna have another law that's not gonna be enforced.
Well, and I'm just gonna tell you, this doesn't pertain to just the lake, folks. In my role as a supervisor, Edgar can probably attest to this as well, and the administrators, your counties are really stressed with, enforcement assets. We don't have them on, in our communities like we need them. And everybody's struggling to keep up.
And they can't even hire them.
We can't hire them, we can't keep up. So, we need a code enforcement officer as an example in Franklin County. I, as an elected official, said, what good is it to put ordinances on the book if we cannot enforce them? If we don't have somebody looking and watching after we adopt things. Same thing goes for the lake. And goodness knows there's not enough enforcement on the lake. So I think that is an independent initiative, John. It has a different set of, procedures that I would recommend that we consider. And we'll take that up on our next board agenda. Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, I agree with everything you were saying except for one thing, and it's just a minor thing. I would suggest that the education program, which is going to be a large undertaking.
Yes.
If it's done right.
Yes.
Very time consuming,
Yes.
done with volunteers. I would suggest that that be one process, and that committee only deal with education. If you want another committee, or preferably even leave it with the board, to look at the other alternatives. or set up another, but we've got to be looking at more than just the education process. We've got to be looking at what other things need to be covered. We have to look at the viability of the process we put in place now. And all of those things are different than probably the people who want to deal well with education. That,
So basically, you're saying, you know, the education piece is gonna come into play with what we have on the books,
yes,
educating those things.
right.
We know we have something, let's educate it, right? And then as you educate, we can talk about unintended consequences, and we can talk about,
Let's face it, if education had been done well, it probably takes more than education. Unfortunately, it takes, if you don't get educated, you have to have some suffering.
yeah.
Just wanting to educate people typically doesn't work. But if that's a recommendation, whatever, but that ought to be a totally separate discussion that people could really zero in on, and not the other aspects of whether we're gonna go forward. I think if we need another committee that's gonna look at the process and all of that, that probably should be set.
Thank you, Bob, I think those points well taken.
Bob, if I'm hearing you right, you want an education group,
Yes, yes,
and then you want like a self-audit group to audit what we're doing ourselves as a
and
board.
what we're
And the
proposing.
process,
Yeah,
right.
and what we're proposing.
Right.
Okay, so, if there's not any further discussion, I would like to ask Mr. Tuck, did you wanna put a motion on the floor?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we recommend the approval of the application from CPT Buoys LLC for the installation of 2 no-wake surfing zone buoys at Merriman Run to DWR.
Okay, is there a second?
I'd like to, make a amendment to that, or propose an amendment. And that amendment be that we allow at least until the end of the season, let's say September next year, to
That needs to be a
evaluate.
separate
That's,
motion.
his motion is just to approve it,
Yeah.
not to get into.
We're gonna have a separate
It's
motion.
going to
for
separate
that.
motion.
Yeah,
Standalone.
yeah, so the motion is to approve the application as submitted and to send it to DWR, for approval or disapproval or their disposition on the application. So is there a second? Mr. Kamisha, is there any further discussion on the motion?
Does that motion have to include the Coast Guard?
It can. DWR
And the
and the
Coast
Coast
Guard.
Guard, yeah,
The
yeah.
appropriate part.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we have 2 in opposition. So, I wanna make sure I've got the vote count right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 7 to 2, right? Is that correct? I have that right? Okay. All right, so the motion carries, the application is approved. Good luck, Dawn. And we wish you well with this, most definitely. You have, you've been very vigilant and you've worked the process very hard, and, I commend you for that. Okay, so, Edgar, we need to craft a motion also that goes to, if you want to put a pause on additional applications and what the parameters around
I
that would
would
be.
also like to make a motion that we would suspend the application process until the full evaluation time frame is up, which would be approximately a year. I don't really matter to me whether you put a date or a time on that.
Let's
but,
do so,
I think you have to.
yeah.
Say through June 1st of 2023. And, that we also task, I think we could just do this consensus, but I'll put it to task the education effort.
And we'll deal with that in a separate motion.
Okay.
So,
The simple motion is that we suspend acceptance of applications through June 1st, 2023.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Is there any further discussion on that?
We can make sure,
Yes,
is
sir.
it immediate suspension?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, let the record show 1 nay, and that carries, 8-1. Okay, Mr. Tuck, do you want to introduce a motion regarding the education initiative?
Do we need it as a motion, or can it just be consensus when it
I
comes?
would rather get it on the record.
Okay.
I'm happy to help you with that if you need some help. Or you just say what you want it to be.
That we create a special education. That we create,
Now that is not fun.
a task force to spearhead a concerted education effort specifically towards the wake surfing community and other tow sports. To be administered through our, water safety, navigation, which one did you say was gonna take it up, navigation?
We need to.
Well, we're gonna discuss it, but you may want to separate.
We need to take it on as a board in conjunction with navigation committee.
Alright,
But I think it's imperative.
dress it up however you want to.
Yeah, I think it's imperative that in that education group, we bring in the wake surfing community
Oh, we'll
itself.
discuss that. Yeah, point well taken.
I'm not sure it's just toad sports. I mean, there's a lot of concern with jet skis. I think it's just.
Wait a minute.
education.
Hang on. All right, hang on. Edgar, you have the floor for your motion.
It's all a mess.
It's raining here.
Well, right now, we're just if they wanna expand it once it gets another, that will be up to them, but I think with the focus primarily towards, wake surfing, wakeboarding, all the tow sports. An education effort that would be ready prior to the spring season kicking off in 2023.
And can I maybe make a friendly amendment to your motion?
Friendly.
Yes. That this education group be a broad spectrum task force, that will, cross-section of the community, basically is what I'm trying to say. Cross-section of the community represented, on this task force, that will be defined with, goals, objectives, and outcomes. And we'll have a report to conclude, so your first motion was June, to suspend till June, right? That the report would be ready in earnest July 1?
Okay, I can live with that.
Is that making sense to everybody? It would give us time for this wake surf zone, no wake surf zone to be implemented from April-ish on through June.
Okay.
And we'll have that information and data, and all the while the education committee or task force, whatever you wanna call yourself, is starting to work post haste. And then any information you garner as a result of the no wake surf zone, I don't know how long it's gonna take to get back a disposition from DWR. So we'll have to notify everybody, when we learn that. But, so that's my friendly amendment, is just more definition to what this group is and what they're gonna be tasked with doing, and who it's going to be.
You got all that?
She has my phone number, unfortunately.
She's got a tape recorder.
Yeah. So Edgar, is that sufficient for you?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Whoever seconds it needs to understand that.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. I will ask for a second to the motion, and we can restate it if needed.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, I hear no opposition, so the motion passes. Okay, are there any other issues relative to no wake surf zones, and anything germane to the application itself? Just loose ends, anything you all would like to state in closing on this topic? I would like to say thank you. Thank you to our board, and thank you to all of the citizens and the business owners that have taken time out of your schedule to show up today. It's very important. You are the process with us, And, I'm very proud that you're with us and we're working on these things hand in hand, and that's the way it needs to be. And if we're not doing that, let me know. I'm your girl. So, yes, sir.
I'm just sitting here thinking, what is going to be the process we use for putting in the ones we've approved? Process now, we're sending forward the, documents. Probably what's gonna happen if we don't say something about it, is they're gonna go to somebody's desk and sit there till next July or March.
What, DWR? We will follow up.
Well, it's a matter of, what do we want, they're gonna ask, since you've done a halt and are waiting till you get education, why should we do anything, no matter whether you call them or not? They're gonna sit there and say, why should we do anything and spend any time until next June?
Well, you know, for all intents and purposes, we have a regulation. We have, an application that was put in due to the regulation, and we have, approved the application. So Carl, do you think that that DWR needs to be apprised of what we're doing for educational purposes and all that? This to me seems like it's just your name in the application.
I think everything, it's follow the normal process to get this to DWR and expect them to, and I'm sure there'll be people in this room that's following their agenda and it should appear at their next, whatever their meeting's set for that. After be noticed.
Well, we will follow up through, the TLAC office once the packet goes to DWR. And we will try to get that expedited, as much as we can and advocate for that. You know, we're all about transparency. If DWR, has questions about it or wants to double back with us, we'll provide any information whatsoever they need. And we can even go to the extent of, giving some background information. But we'll follow our attorney's advice on how we submit. Okay, all right, I'm gonna move on to, two other agenda items, at your pleasure. We have, the approval of the aquatic vegetation